worth knowing.
All right, man. Welcome to Crow 777 Radio. This is episode 234. Jason Lindgren is with me, and Clive DeCarl is back. We're going to cover a number of things that have to do with health. I think we're going to open the conversation with addiction. Apparently, there were studies way back that kind of got buried. I remember when I was reading about Gerson. Gerson claimed that you could take someone off a heroin addiction, which is a pretty serious addiction, in 3 days without a lot of withdrawal. Clive has other things that he's going to add. But anyhow, welcome, Jason.
And good morning, Crow.
Okay, we have some other notes, and there's a couple things here, Jason, that I think I'd like to touch on. I think a lot of people are going to have an interest in autism in children and reversing Alzheimer's. And I think those three things alone might take us quite a ways.
Yeah, those are all great topics. I know Clive wants to focus on solutions that can be offered. So whichever one we want to start with is good with me.
Yeah, it's, we've come to a place where everything old is now new again, isn't it? Everyone's going back, literally back to the future. But anyhow, welcome, Clive.
Thank you very much, Crow. Nice to speak to you and Jason. Thank you.
Good to have you back, man. Have you recovered from the onslaught from the last show we did? I think you got pummeled pretty hard there.
Well, it was incredible. It was a huge wake-up call. I had no idea that the supply chains of the world were as destroyed as they were. And right now, I see future problems. And I'm saying to people, look, well, what I suggest you do is stock up with the really important things for you right now. Hopefully, you'll never, ever need them in a million years. But what is most crucial? Well, if you're hungry, well, if you know how to do it sensibly, you can more or less fast and get away with it. But if you really have to have some answer to a virus or any other problem that might sort of come along, you want to make sure you've got enough stocks right now to make sure that you don't run out. I mean, I'm advising people, well, look, why not invest in something that even if there's hyperinflation, that the value is always going to be there. So, I mean, let's say you bought a bunch of vitamin C or a bunch of magnesium or the products we're going to talk about that deal with addiction and so on, or the ones for arthritis or whatever. Why not buy 3 years worth right now while you can, so to speak? Because if there's hyperinflation, that's what's going to cost a lot of money, because everybody's always going to want vitamin C because it's one of the most important things out. Do you see what I mean? But I think now people might be buying Bitcoin, they might be investing in gold or silver or whatever. But actually, those three things, while incredibly useful or whatever, the fact is that you want stuff that you want and your neighbors want. If things get hard, you want everybody around you to be fit and well, your whole family. And I think right now, investing in some of these really cheap, actually incredibly useful, amazing products is the way forward.
All right, let's cover a couple things on the tail of what was going on in the world and just the hundreds of orders for things like vitamin C. You found that the supply chain had broken down, even for things like packaging. So let's put it out there right now. As a matter of fact, I have a couple comments that I was going to email you about. If someone has some trouble and they're waiting for C, do you just have a regular contact on your website they can use to make you aware?
Yes, info@clivedecale.com. But, things are happening on many levels. We found that lots of people said, well, we haven't received the parcel. Then it turned out that they had attempted to deliver it because they were too scared to knock on the door in case of COVID. They either left it on the street or they put a card through the door saying that it had to be picked up at the local depot or whatever. And the companies, the delivery companies, were completely thrown out by everything. And I'm sure most people are aware of this. But the main problem was that what things we can normally buy, let's say, in a week, were suddenly being quoted 3 months.
Well, here's what happened to me. I had vitamin C and magnesium coming. The magnesium became a problem, but that problem is now fixed, just so everyone knows. And shortly that will be back to some kind of normalcy. But what happened with me is my package from you got held up in New York at customs. They opened it by the way, and I think it was held for something like 10 or 12 days. But I think we're getting back to maybe little things like that won't matter, but just as long as people know you're on top of it, you've been on top of it. That's what I've been telling people. It will get here. It's a sign of the times. And by the way, if you have some concern, Clive has given you the contact for the email, but let's get into a thing that affects so many people. Addiction has really become quite a thing, part of life for so many people in the United States. I can't speak to other places. Part of it was the free-for-all handing out of addictive pharmaceutical medicines for probably the better part of a decade and a half, maybe, something like that, and then all of a sudden cutting everyone off. But let's get into this, Clive. Many kinds of addiction, and I think you maybe have ways of dealing and getting people free. I mean, there's really nothing in the world, a sense of freedom, like breaking an addiction and walking away. But go ahead, Clive.
Well, quite. Just one last thing on the previous subject. What we've done since the last show is we've now bought several tons of vitamin C, and it's stocked in a warehouse in the States. I'm just having 4,000 bottles of magnesium made in the United States. So we're slowly switching over from sending stuff from the UK to sending stuff from the US. So that side of it is we're getting there fast. So
I'll add, I do the vitamin C and the magnesium every day. The finger problem I had is it was keeping me from playing my mandolin. The magnesium helped to the point where it's not even an issue. And what I've noticed about the C is you find your balance point so that it's not putting you in the bathroom too much. It just makes you feel better, doesn't it?
It's totally remarkable, the vitamin C. It is the most crucial vitamin by far. And the people who've got enough vitamin C, let me give you one classic example for women giving birth. The figures are something like women who have enough vitamin C have 9 times less tearing when they give birth. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Wow. And similarly, women who have adequate amounts of magnesium give birth much more easily because it's a muscle relaxant. They don't teach this stuff to doctors in medical school. They don't teach it, and it's criminal, obviously.
I ended up seeing a doctor. They told me it's some version of trigger finger. They told me I have to get surgery to correct that, and I actually ended up seeing a doctor after I'd done, and I told the whole thing to her, and she was all about it. Wanted to know everything. Wanted to know what I did. There's a real change of heart, but while we've got time and hour one where this goes out to so many people who just want to come here, let's get into addiction. There are a ton of people out there that are struggling with one type of addiction or another.
Well, exactly. So this is what happens. One takes in a substance, it could be heroin, it could be any of the opiates, it could be a pharmaceutical drug, it could be cocaine or crack or alcohol, whatever it might be. Essentially, at one level, they're toxins. So our bodies are hugely adaptable. We're incredible. So we can adapt to toxins. That's usually something we can do. And the body will make, if you like, produce from our chemical factory that we are, antitoxins to deal with it. So let's say now the heroin addict or whatever the addict is wants to come off. Now, suddenly they stop, or they taper off, they stop their toxin, and now the body is overwhelmed with antitoxins because the body hasn't woken up to the fact the toxin isn't there. So the trick is to find substances that neutralize your body's own antitoxins, and they exist. So they discovered, 40 plus years ago, that if you use the right simple, inexpensive materials, you can make withdrawal from anything remarkably easy. And I'll tell you what those things are. Number one could be, it's all arguable, selenium. It's a mineral, it's an antioxidant. It's a bit like oxygen, it's a bit like vitamin C. And selenium neutralizes toxins to an incredible degree. And the thing is that there was a while back, there's a program, I've not watched it, but there's a program called House, apparently, a doctor's program, where in one of the episodes, somebody in this fictional program had an overdose of selenium. They got selenium poisoning. Now, and people actually took, but everything they see, I think, on TV, they believe is real, don't they? And so people are very frightened about taking any more than the RDA of selenium. But of course, it turns out that you can take massively more than the RDA, and the sorts of things that selenium will do. Let me just, I know we're on addiction, but just let me run through just a few of the things that it sort of does. It changes the transmembrane potential of the cells. Now, we are electrical beings. The way our bodies work are little Tesla resonating circuits, and depending on the electrical charge of our cells, depends on how acidic or alkaline our bodies are running. And there are a number of factors that can make sure that we are running on an electrical basis correctly, and selenium's one of them. So people who've got herpes or shingles, they can benefit from selenium. People with any sort of flu-like symptoms, they can benefit from it. It is a smaller cell than oxygen or sulfur. They're on the same part of the periodic table. And when you get something that's smaller, that means it's much more concentrated, if you like, and can get into smaller spaces. So selenium, smaller than oxygen, smaller than sulfur. Sulfur is considered to be one of the best detoxification agents out there. But of course, what if selenium is better because it's smaller, which it is, because it will go deeper. So it only goes, but we've got, it's coming onto the website in a couple of weeks or so. We've got a new type of targeted selenium. It's incredible, right? It's bonded to a nut oil, a very rare nut oil. And it was developed about 40 years ago, but has been ignored, except by the people who realize how incredibly powerful it is. So it suddenly makes addiction easy. Suddenly, you've turned off, using this incredibly powerful material, the antitoxin, and you don't need very much, and it's not expensive. As far as the RDA is concerned, the bottle that we sell would last you a year, and that's just one drop of this liquid every 3 days. But if you're trying to fix an addiction, you might want to try sort of 10 drops every day for a week. You could do 20 drops, but that would be loads.
Let me ask you something about this, because what happened when the supply chain broke is I had run out of the magnesium and I wanted to keep doing it. So I knew I could get it from my local CVS or Rite Aid or whatever, where, the local kind of pharmacy type stores. And I ended up picking up the wrong one. I picked up some kind of calcium. And so I talked to Clive. He said, no, go with the citrate would be better. So with the selenium, is this a thing people can go get off the shelf if they're in dire straits and they need to? And if so, are there different kinds? Is there anything they need to know?
Right. Yes, there are many different kinds, and I need to put a rider with what I've just said. It sounded like I was giving medical advice, which I absolutely wasn't. I'm just repeating what the manufacturers say are their instructions. Anything I say is anecdotal and not to be construed as medical advice. Sorry, I just want to say that for legal reasons. And people need to do their own research and not do what I say, just treat what I'm saying as useful information. So there's one caveat with selenium. Women who are pregnant should not take it in high doses. They can take the RDA, but if they're pregnant, there is too much selenium, and it's not good for pregnancy. So, almost every packet you've ever seen says do not take when pregnant, and most of it's just to keep the insurance companies happy. But with this one, pregnant women should not use high doses of selenium. Everybody needs selenium, but in just the smaller doses. And food could be enough. Brazil nuts, full of selenium. Pistachio nuts have quite a lot in it. So just from a day-to-day, how much selenium do you need? You can eat your way to enough selenium with Brazil nuts and pistachios, and just look up online foods containing selenium. But if you've got an addiction you want to get over, then you want to investigate the right amount. And I'll be putting up a video specifically all about selenium in the next week or so. I'm just editing it at the moment. So it's an incredibly important material.
Let me pull you back around, Clive. So if someone walks into their local store, will they find selenium on the shelf?
They will.
Do they need to know something to do it right?
Yes. If they want to buy it right away in the store, selenomethionine would be the way forward.
Okay. Also, in the video you're going to post, you found these studies, basically the things we're talking about. Part of what we're talking about is based on studies that happened almost half a century ago. Do you cite those studies if people want to find them?
Yes, I will. I haven't done it yet, but it's part of the plan. We're just adding it to the website now. And I should say, actually, I should have said earlier, we can right now send this special selenium out directly to your customers. So by the time they hear this, it will be on the website, and we will be able to send it straight out. So it is in stock and can be posted from the United States.
All right. And just to be perfectly clear, what we're doing here is we're citing things that were done in past studies. You need to go do your own research, just like anything, if you're going to take a vitamin or anything else. And these are basically mostly natural products that we're talking about. You need to go look at the studies and other things so that you know what you're doing.
And what's the time frame, do you think, Clive? I'm sure it depends upon the level of addiction, but when would someone start feeling some sort of relief if they're having bad withdrawal symptoms?
The thing is that you start this before you have withdrawal symptoms. The way, I've been helping people come off addictive drugs for a couple of decades, and the first thing you do is set them up for it. It's not, I'm having withdrawal symptoms, I better do something about it. The whole coming off any substance just needs a little bit of very careful planning and thought. So some people say, well, I'm going to try and give up whatever it is. And I'd immediately pick them up and say, no, you don't. You want to do it. If you try, it means you're going to fail because, you weaken once, you've failed now. But if you're doing it, well, you could take a day off if you had to. But the idea here is 72 hours. You want to be as withdrawal free as absolutely possible. And in 72 hours, you're absolutely free of it. No hustle at all. That's what you're aiming for. So it's making the body strong in the first place so that it's ready for to deal with the antitoxins, and then realizing that a few simple things that you need, selenium being one of them, but it has to be in the right dose to be appropriate. And if you were to go to all the health food stores in the world and buy their dose, well, it would just be ridiculous because their doses aren't large enough. So the reason that my product is excellent is that 1 drop every 3 days is RDA. But if you need to take a lot more, that's what your health advisor has told you to do, then you can, and it's affordable, and it's not in tablets or something. You take a very high dose of tablets, and you're getting all the binders and glues that are sticking it all together. The idea with high dose treatments like this is absolute purity of product.
So you mentioned, though, is selenium enough? You mentioned 3 things. So let's say there's a person out there listening that got addicted to a pain pill, which is one of the very popular addictions over the last 10, 20 years in this country. Yeah. Would it be selenium alone, or are there 3 things that are coming? Yeah.
No, more than 3, really, but there are 3 super important. Let me tell you about the next big one, which is amino acids. Now, if we look at the human body, obviously we're mainly water, aren't we? But you can look at it from various perspectives. In dry body weight, we're about 2.5% minerals and vitamins, but we're 70% amino acids by dry body weight. So amino acids are obviously us in a big way. We're also bacteria. We're outnumbered 10 to 1 by bacteria in our gut, for instance. But amino acids generally come from animal products. So Vegans, for instance, without fail, are going to be low on some amino acids. Taurine is the most worrying one. Taurus the bull. Taurine, that amino acid, is all about eyesight. But vegans are right because we've found a way using fermented proteins from plants to make a vegan amino acid supplement that works. So this is good for meat eaters and for non-meat eaters alike. And, there are loads of amino acid supplements out there, but almost all of them are designed for bodybuilders. If you want to put on muscle, you're lacking muscle. Bodybuilders used to eat like 10 steaks for breakfast, but now they take amino acids instead. So if I've got somebody who's really old and they can't eat, they're just too tired to eat, give them amino acids and water, and they build muscles because you're giving them the amino acids directly without having to tire them out with digestion. So some people feel it right away. In fact, most people, if they need amino acids, they'll notice it right away. Right, that night, maybe they haven't been sleeping well. Maybe they've been low on tryptophan, for example. Have some tryptophan before bed, and they'll know immediately that night whether they were lacking it or not. And similarly, take a decent dose in the morning, and you'll know I've got more energy or I've not got more energy. But the incredible thing, that's relative here is what it does with addiction. Now, 30% of us, something like that, are the addictive type. And what it seems to come down to is that we were born with our dopamine receptors not working properly, basically. So 70% of people have got perfectly functioning dopamine receptors, and they're never going to become an addict on a serious level to anything particularly, because they've got the dopamine, which is the pleasure hormone, essentially. When you experience pleasure, you get a rush of dopamine. So, the kids who are addicted to their mobile phones and any addiction, it's that rush of dopamine that we want. That's why we like it addictive, because we want the rush and the rush and the rush and so on. That's dopamine. So that's pleasure. And people confuse pleasure with happiness. The advertising industry will tell you pleasure is happiness. Have the next fix and you will be happy. No, you won't. Happiness is serotonin. And serotonin, well, no, let me go back one step. Dopamine can be downregulated by the brain. So, the first time the addict takes their addiction of choice, whatever it is, just imagine it's a beer, they go, wow, this is so nice. Why didn't somebody tell me about this before? Because the first time possibly in their life, or, rarely if they had that full hit of dopamine where they go, wow, life is wonderful, sort of thing. And then after a while, they need 2 beers to get the same effect, or 3 beers, or 3 joints, or, they become an addict to sex or whatever it is. So it turns out that large doses of amino acids can reset your dopamine levels. Bam, just done. There are clinics out there who do like 10-day intravenous amino acid therapy. And because it works, you reset the dopamine levels. And, obviously, you want to get over an addiction, you've got to decide what you're going to do instead. You've got to decide, everybody's an addict for a reason, some pain, some trauma, whatever it is. So it's not just as simple as, take the selenium and the amino acids and you'll be okay. Obviously, you've got to deal with yourself, get over the past, forgiveness, gratitude. They're the keys, really. When I was studying cancer survivors, it was gratitude, they said, more than anything. It's when they became grateful to everything that was happening to life that they recovered. And so, if you've suffered enough with the addiction, then you forgive yourself. You just had an experience. You didn't do anything wrong. You just had a very, very unpleasant experience, possibly, or not. But, we have to forgive ourselves for the past and forgive everybody else who hurt us. Be grateful for now. And then suddenly realizing there are all these tricks out there to defuse the alcoholism, to defuse stuff. I've had people who've had just total results with amino acids by taking a month's worth of amino acids every day for a short period of time. It's like doing it on an intravenous type level. And they've got to be the right amino acids. There are loads of amino acids out there. Got to be the right blend for the job. And I'm now on my 3rd amino acid blend. Every now and then we just keep improving it when we realize we can improve it. We've just done an improvement just very recently. And The great thing about amino acids, you know about it. You'll know whether they're for you right away. So, I've said to people, look, take a third of a bottle in the morning, a third of the bottle in the afternoon, a third of a bottle in the evening. And, a lot of them find that by the evening, they don't want whatever was the drug of choice. Again, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just saying what I've observed. I'm not saying that you should do it. So amino acids are amazing. But the other things they do are incredible. It's mood. Some people say, I feel 20 years younger. I know people who, they just take about a sixth of the dose that I would recommend, and that's all they need to have energy all day. It's quite bizarre. Increases libido, happiness, mood. You take it on an empty stomach. Normally, a dessert spoon and a half would be what most people might take once or twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening. But I know people just half a teaspoonful. That's all they need. So start with a little bit and see if you notice and see what happens. Some people just notice nothing because they don't need it.
So are you suggesting that based on the studies and stuff you've seen, say a person is taking something like pain pills, they begin doing this and then get ready to quit taking whatever the thing is that they're addicted to?
Well, yes, and they might find that it just happens automatically. That's the idea, that if you do the various things that I recommend, all at once, with careful planning, in 72 hours, you should be free of it. We're so conditioned to the fact that it's going to be awful. We've watched all the TV programs. We've watched people withdraw from heroin on TV or films or whatever. So we're programmed to be, it's going to be awful. But what if that's not always the case? The industry is so terrible. When I was young, the heroin addicts in London would queue up at about midnight outside the big pharmacy right in the middle of London, Piccadilly Circus, and theft because of heroin addiction was, as far as I'm aware, unheard of because they could just get it on a prescription. Then they stopped that, and then the criminal dealers started doing the heroin, and then stealing started in England because of heroin and so on. And then the drugs companies saw that they were losing out, so they had that stuff banned and really stamped on, the drug war, and they brought out their own version, methadone, and started cutting out the drug dealers and selling a worse product direct. So the good news is you can get off methadone as well, and methadone is probably harder to get off than heroin. When I first became interested in this subject, maybe about 20 years ago, I was going to conferences and so on about iboga, which is a very interesting plant material. It's the rite of passage plant that they give you when you're becoming an adult, about 13, something like that. And it's a week-long initiation process, and millions of people in the Congo, lots of the pygmies, that sort of area of the world, Cameroon, the president of Cameroon, I don't know about the current one, but it's the Bwiti religion that uses it primarily. So, it's commonplace there. And it just so happens that people, after an iboga session or ibogaine, the extract, that the opiate receptors in the brain are totally turned off completely. So heroin addicts suddenly find they have no desire for heroin after one iboga session. The danger is that habit, pressure, familiarity, they go back and take the dose they took 24 hours earlier and they die because they've reset the opiate receptors and they massively overdose if they go back to the original stuff. So iboga works, ibogaine works. I've also seen a device called the E-Libra, very, very interesting. It's not bioresonance, it's something unique, but it's a machine. It costs maybe $15,000, and there are practitioners around the place who do E-Libra treatments. And I myself have taken my clients to E-Libra specialists who run the programs, and I've had people who are the most terrible crack and heroin addicts both together at the same time. So bad this couple had the authorities had taken away their children. They were in such a bad state, so they collapse, stoned out their brains into these very comfy chairs, get connected to them to the frequency device, and they go to sleep, each of them for 2 hours. When they wake up, I say to them, "Okay, do you want some crack, some heroin?" I said, "No." I said, "At all? You really fancy it at all?" I said, "No." So the E-Libra practitioners who are good at running the machine, because it's an art and a skill and so on, that can be massively helpful as well. But if you were going to do that, then you have to have, in my opinion, to be super comfortable long term, of already hit up with the selenium, the amino acids, and let's talk about some of the other things that can be done.
Hold on for a second. Do you spell that ELIBRA? Is that actually Libra in disguise?
It's E-LYBRA.
Sounds like the idea of balance is being stashed in there, but sorry for interrupting. But just to catch everyone up, we've covered 2 of the 3 things so far. We opened up with selenium. We did amino acids next. We've covered a few other things. The third will follow as we go along here. Go ahead, Clive.
Okay, well, I think probably the next one to talk about is probably charcoal. Now, charcoal is a super interesting thing because we used to sit around the fire eating food and we'd be breathing in charcoal dust, all the time. It would have been normal to us. And, charcoal is this magical material because it's not absorbent, it's adsorbent. It encapsulates toxins into its sort of outer shell. So if you were to swallow some charcoal in a capsule, for instance, and it was the right type of charcoal, it would draw toxins out of you, just draw them out. And it will also help with the whole antitoxin thing. It is remarkable because when you do any type of detox, now the toxins are going to come out from where they've been stored, which is often in fat. Anybody who's is carrying a lot of fat, that's where the body parks toxins. That's why detoxifications work. But you want to be sure, if you do a detoxification, that you are making sure that you can remove the stuff that you've now got out of the cells. And charcoal is super interesting. Now, everybody has heard of activated charcoal. That's what they give people in the emergency room if they're poisoned. But activated charcoal is not what you want, actually, in anything other than a super life-threatening situation. Because activated charcoal is a sort of 100-degree acid-washed process, and it doesn't just suck out poisons, it sucks out loads of the good stuff as well. But old-fashioned charcoal is what you want. So there are lots of types of charcoal on the market, but what you want is an old wood, the hardest wood tree you can find. You want it super deep rooted, and you want it in a place where there are loads of minerals in the soil. So what we do is we found exactly that: narrow ringed, super old hardwood trees that can be harvested properly, and it's okay. We're not it's all sustainable. And so that means that the tree roots have mined the minerals from the soil. Now, minerals aren't damaged by heat. So by creating charcoal, you've got this incredible mineral product, but it's way more than that. I mean, it alkalizes the body and removes acidic toxins. So if you've got cancer or something like that, you're full of acidic toxins. And so charcoal needs to be not only the hardwood, as I've said, but also it needs to be of the right. You don't want it as a fine powder. You don't want it in huge lumps. You want the lumps to be the exact right size to do the job properly in the body. There's an art. And basically, bacteria, for example, only pathogenic ones, because of the positive charge, bind to the surface of old-fashioned charcoal. So I decided that I would use the real technical definition of charcoal to describe it. Now, a lot of people have heard about C60. We discussed it as being potentially nano C60 being a really seriously bad thing in the last episode. But of course, the opposite is that old-fashioned charcoal is C60. It's the natural form of C60. One doesn't go to nano. We've had it all the time. We've been breathing it in since we were young. And what would happen is, after the fire had cooled down, they would have taken the ash outside and sprinkled it on the vegetable patch, making everything grow super well. We would have been recycling all those minerals over and over. Then in places where around the world they couldn't get salt, they were too far from the sea, what did they do? They used potash. So that's where you put a metal pot on the fire and or banana leaves or whatever it is, and then underneath that, the crust of the ash is white. That's potash. And they used to take that and put it in the next day's food, sprinkle it on. It used to happen all around the world. So we're hugely familiar with charcoal as C60, and we're constantly in contact with radiation. There's radon, radioactive materials in the soil. So when we burn gasoline, lots of the pollutants in the world, people don't realize that that's radiation. It's radioactive, a lot of the wastes that are around. Now, one of the great things about C60 charcoal is it sucks in radiation, sucks it into itself, and then you excrete it. One thing we didn't talk about when we talked about nano C60 before, if you get nano C60 on your skin, it'll tattoo it. So as we mentioned before, the danger of the nano stuff is it goes in, won't come out.
Also conductive, right? The artificial kinds. That's what you and I were talking about. Are we, people doing this? We looked at all the research, and it's hard to make heads or tails. There's so much hullabaloo about it. But what we could logically put together is if you're doing these artificial C60s, are you basically turning yourself into an antenna?
Well, that's it. So, we already are antennas for a lot of stuff. We're so poisoned. There are loads of people who say, I've got brain fog, I'm in pain all the time, that sort of thing. Well, you can, that's probably because we're toxically poisoned, maybe with toxic metals, for example. So C60 will suck them out, just like the selenium will suck them out. All these things are just tailor-made for the job. In World War One, when they were dealing with chlorine gas, when they were dealing with mustard gas, what was in the gas masks? I'll tell you what was in the gas masks. It was charcoal.
So that's another thing that you have on offer. So the three things that we've talked about to some degree is selenium, amino acids, and then just good old-fashioned natural charcoal, not activated. I actually know you have it because I had some.
Well, exactly. Then there are some very interesting other things that you can use for the same issue. Now, what I'm interested in is emergency room medicine, right? In the emergency room, what do they use there? Their job is to save your life no matter what, bring you back from the dead, stitch you back together again. So I started studying what they use in the emergency room. So we all know what they use. They use saline, right? That's like almost number one. So what is that? Well, it's basically salt. Right? Okay, so how important is salt? Well, we're told not to eat salt, but it must be important if that's what the first thing they inject you with. So what's maybe one of the second things? Well, bicarbonate of soda, sodium bicarb. It's on every crash cart everywhere. It is what it will inject you with to get you back to life after a stroke, all sorts of things. Then what have they got next to that? They have the magnesium. They'll inject you with that if you're having a heart attack, because it'll stop the heart attack, bam, just like that. They'll probably use it for a stroke as well. What else have they got? Well, they certainly have selenium. They're going to have potassium, all the stuff that the normal doctors aren't taught in medical school. The absolute basics. All I'm interested in is the basics. At the moment on my website, I've only got about a dozen products because essentially most people, that's all they need, because we're self-repairing. So if you've got the core building blocks, salt, why is bicarb important? Well, bicarb's important because as we get older, we get a deficiency of bicarb. Our bodies make bicarb. It's like the next process after the stomach, through the stomach, which is acid, obviously, goes into the next stage, which is a bicarbonate sort of mixture, which is alkaline. So two things create a bicarb deficiency: aging and poisoning. And we're all poisoning. Bicarbonate is essentially in the blood. You can't really tell the difference between bicarbonate and CO2. They are interchangeable. And, CO2, as you know, has been demonized, but we need CO2. It's super important. And because it balances out oxygen. And so breathing is incredibly important to bicarb and incredibly important to carbon dioxide and to oxygen. But the issue is most of us are breathing too fast. We should be breathing, reasonably deeply. We should be sitting upright, if you're now slumped over a computer typing or something, you're blocking your airflow dramatically. So if most of us are in a panic half the time, we're breathing too fast, get in a panic state, you breathe too fast, and now you're drastically affecting your CO2 levels, which means you're not getting enough oxygen, and it's a disaster, just like masks are a disaster. You need all the oxygen you can get. So how to use bicarb? Well, a lot of people might, say, a couple of hours after a meal or before bed, take half a teaspoonful of sodium bicarbonate in water. That would mean that their bodies would be alkaline all night, which would be a very good state to be in. Some people have baths in it. Again, I've got videos all about bicarb. And if you take large doses, it's essential that you test your own urine with pH strips or a pH meter to be accurate. These materials, while costing almost nothing, are so powerful, and you want to make sure you get it right, particularly with bicarb, which is not to take too much. And my video explains exactly how to do it from the expert who wrote the book. I interview, if you like, the experts who write the book. So I'm not claiming to be the expert, but I have made videos along these lines. So bicarb is an incredibly important one. Then the next most important one has got to be vitamin C, because vitamin C is one of the absolute ultimate detoxification agents. And we discussed that considerably, I think, in the last show. There are a few supplements I take every day. Vitamin C is one, magnesium is one, fulvic minerals is one, and Celtic salt. You can just buy that in anywhere, serious Celtic salt. But that's because I know that that's what I need. Other people might need some of the other absolute basics. So along with vitamin C, one of the keys, absolute keys, is fulvic minerals, Fulvic. Now, if you wanted to have a mineral supplement for free, you couldn't afford any supplementation or you want it for free, then all you got to do is get a bucket and spade and go out into the old forest, as old as you can get near you, dig up some soil right in the middle of the forest, and find some spring water or something and make a drink out of muddy water. This would be absolute perfection in terms of minerals. It's why dogs like to drink out of puddles rather than out of a clean bowl, because everything that's ever lived and died, every bud of the tree, every twig, every leaf, every butterfly, every bee, every bird, every animal, all the life in the soil, everything has lived and died, and the soil is a true reflection of total life, right? So
you can smell that too, right? When you go into the forest, you grab a handful of soil and you smell it, you just know.
Yeah, and often, depending, in England anyway, you can just put your hand right in the soil, and it's usually really soft and easy to work and so on. Depends. Anyway, you've probably seen those documentaries where the animals, there's this great one on the BBC where there's this huge dam and you see these goats climbing an impossible dam right up the side of the dam. It's impossible because the certain rocks that they built it with were oozing minerals, and they climb like 1,000 feet up a sheer drop so they can lick these minerals. And there are places around the world where minerals ooze out of the rocks, basically. And there's one material, one deposit in America, which I discovered. There are many places. Fulvic minerals, fulvic and humic acids is technically what they're called, are in the soil everywhere. They're underneath your house right now. They're everywhere. But there are certain deposits around the world. There's one in most countries where it's so rich that you only need the tiniest amount. You don't need a whole bucket full of muddy water. You just need 10 drops of this stuff. And so I was shopping around for a very long time trying to find one that was really good. And suddenly I found one that changed my life. It just made me feel so much better the next day. And I started giving it to people, and people were getting amazing results. Not everybody, because some people just don't need it. But basically, as we all know, food is missing all the trace elements because the soil is dead. The life bacteria, all the little creepy crawly things, they're all pretty much dead. All the fungus is dead and so on. So the cycle is broken. So all the trace elements that used to be made by the mushrooms or whatever it was just aren't there in the soil anymore. Therefore, they're not in the food. So, sick soils lead to sick plants, which lead to sick people. So, but luckily, there are these incredibly rich deposits, and it's incredibly inexpensive, this stuff. Less than $50, and you've got 4 months' supply. It's really cheap. And it's totally natural. It's just water extracted. They reckon it's about 38 million years old, this deposit. And then, supposedly, plant life and animal life was much bigger and more diverse. They say that, before the first sort of cataclysm, or the last cataclysm, that there was 4 times the diversity on the planet at that point. So if that's true, this material is reflective of it. And one tiny little bottle lasts 4 months. It's amazing. And it changes the acid-alkali ratio in the body, which is what you want. But this is where it gets really good. It is so tiny. It is the most complex molecule on the planet, really, because it is all life being soil-derived. And everything is, every amino acid ever, every mineral ever, every trace element, everything is in fulvic minerals, basically. And what it does is it goes into the body, you drink it with lots of water, it meets a cell, it hydrates the cell, it changes the structure of the water in the cell, it detoxifies the toxins in the cells, it replaces those with itself, so it puts all the trace elements in, and it's like this incredible cleaning system. I mean, everything we've discussed does this, but fulvic minerals is particular in how it works. And I started studying it about 12 years ago, I suppose. I was looking at cancer reversal in China, and I'd never heard of fulvic minerals before, really. And they've been using it for 100 years or more, I suppose, in all sorts of different ways. And I was just blown away by it. And I think I was the first person in England to actually sell the stuff. Now it's really commonplace. You can buy loads of it. But my experience was when I was searching for the right quality, it's always about quality. Most of the stuff you buy just doesn't work because, and that's probably deliberate. 95% of the industry is owned by the bad guys. So what do you expect? But real fulvic minerals can be absolutely life-changing. The first person I ever gave it to was a friend of mine who's 3 months pregnant, and she came back 3 days later and said her morning sickness had stopped. And, it's not the cure for morning sickness, but in her case, she was missing some minerals. And once she got the minerals, whatever it was from the fulvic, she didn't have morning sickness anymore. You're not meant to have that. So fulvic minerals, super important. But the other really crucial thing about fulvic minerals to know is that the bacteria in your gut, we're outnumbered 10 to 1 by bacteria. Your immune system is the bacteria in the gut primarily. They love the trace elements that are in fulvic minerals. So if you've ever had an antibiotic or a drug from the doctor and you now want to repair the damage, fulvic minerals are a brilliant prebiotic. We've all heard of probiotics, but if we take prebiotics and what we want to do is not get probiotics from some cow necessarily somewhere. We want to repopulate what the antibiotic or the drug that we were given wiped out. So fulvic minerals and so on there's one particular mineral, trace element called yttrium, and we don't use yttrium, but the bacteria in our gut does.
Okay, so I think we're getting close to the top of the hour here. So let's just outline a couple things. We opened up with addiction. The 3 things that we covered are selenium, amino acids, and then just old-fashioned charcoal made by nature, not activated. Those were the basic 3 constituents. You said that you would be posting some clips that talk directly about this for people who want to know more on your site, on your website. And Clive, why don't you go ahead and tell people what your website is and reiterate your contact one more time?
Right. Because I'm in England, I can't put these things on my website, so I have to put them behind a club. I have a private members club, which my website is clivedeccarl.com, and in there you'll see a page to join the Secret Health Club. And behind a club, of course, I can put up this information, so that's really where to find it. I'm afraid you have to pay money to join the club, but it's worth it. And clivedeccarl.com. CLIVEDECARLE. And if you need to contact me, there's a contact form there. I get pretty busy, so don't expect an immediate reply. I do consultations for people. one or two a day. And I'm pretty good at helping people through whatever their issues are.
You know, in this age, it's crazy where we saw the kind of pharmaceutical companies go crazy and start handing out, like M&Ms, things that addicted people horribly, changed their lives, ruined lives. But it's always been assumed that breaking the addiction is horrible. People began to realize things like kratom could help them get away, but then they ended up being addicted to the kratom once they got away. All these problems. I once saw a person who had been on basically some form of Vicodin for almost a decade, get a shot, sneeze about 50 times, and then be totally better. And it goes to show that these things have been known. People like Clive going back 40 years, going back to the old things that we used to know, and finding out that there are ways that you don't have to go through hell and back to get through this. But that does bring us to the top of the first hour. What we're going to do here is we're going to come back. And by the way, I'm not at all sure that this is going to be able to run on YouTube now that we've said everything we've said, because the self thing you got to do and answer all these questions, I can already tell you that it won't pass. And this is the new YouTube that we got to deal with. They don't want to be relevant. You can't talk about relevant things. You want to play with a hula hoop or kick someone in the nads, you're good to go. You want to talk about something relevant. It's getting more difficult. When we come back in the second hour at crow777radio.com, we're going to talk about ideas about Alzheimer's, how to reverse it, trying to deal with autism in children, other things, but I think those are two big ones. And weight loss was also on the agenda here, but that's another thing that absolutely underscores that we're coming to the end of the age. I know at least 5 people who were morbidly obese most of their life who have completely lost all that weight now. There's something in the air. There's change in the air. And so that's why Jason and I are covering these things. Anyhow, join us for the second hour of this discussion. We may go a little further into addiction, I'm not sure, at crow777radio.com. That's CRROW 777radio.com. That is the only real Crow site in the world. Anything else is a fake, a knockoff. They're up to no good things, basically. Welcome to the world we live in online. But anyhow, one more time, join us at crow777radio.com for the second hour. And Jason, anything you want to add?
In the second hour, I want to stress that the things that Clive was just talking about, I'm pretty sure you used to be able to actually get most of it, at least, from food. And it's just not true anymore. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit in the second hour.
Such a critical point. You know, I'm as close to a vegetarian as you could be without being a vegetarian. I eat eggs. I eat some other things. I basically never eat red meat. I do eat fish occasionally, but recently I've been eating smoked salmon. And for me, it is night and day. I feel so much better when I just have smoked salmon and rice or something like that with certain kinds of nuts in it. And this is, in fact, the point. We've come to a point where our food supply has just been decimated. And if you go into a grocery store and you start going down the aisles, reading those labels, you start to realize, and by the way, before I close up here, there was a comment going on crow777radio.com about a law that was passed apparently in July, a year before all the virus stuff started, saying something about they didn't have to label food in a certain way in such a case as this type of a supposed emergency. And I've always wondered, you know, what would happen if something was done to a product like, say, milk that 90% of the world uses. I'm just saying, you need to be diligent in these times. But anyhow, join us at crow777radio.com for the second half of 234. There it is. Cheers.